computer. Hello, so today we're talking about alternative grading strategies. We're going to talk probably a lot about grading contracts today. I have a guest. Please introduce yourself, where you teach and what you teach.
Yes, I'm Michelle Cowan, and I am an assistant professor of business administration at Washington and Lee University in Virginia. And that's about it. And I teach. I teach business communication, foundations of business communication, and related courses, digital multimedia communication as well.
Great, thank you. So, how does your method of grading differ from the traditional way that we all probably experienced as students and that lots of us use right now?
Well, the number one thing that students notice is I do not give grades on individual assignments. Individual assignments are usually either complete, incomplete, needs review, needs revision, things like that. And then grades are calculated at the end of the semester, usually based on how many, completes they have, how many incompletes, how many, engagement levels of engagement they have. So whether that be attendance, whether that be journal entries that they have to do, whether it be peer reviews and things like that. So it's really about sort of the amount of work they're doing in different categories of work, and less about, okay, what did I achieve on this 0 to 100 scale on a particular assignment? My grading scheme is really geared toward getting students to try a lot of different genres and do a lot of different kinds of work. That's my particular goal. I'm not necessarily looking for mastery, especially in a first year writing class, but I'm looking for them to engage in different kinds of writing and really give each other feedback and things like that.
How do they respond to that, your students?
I would say in the beginning of the semester, they usually don't quite rock what's going on. Like they don't quite they understand that the grading is different, and some of them will feel some apprehension about it. Some people are excited about it because they're like, oh, okay, it's just complete and incomplete. I can understand that. Some students are unsure about it, but in the beginning of the semester, usually they don't say very much. It's usually about midway toward the end of the semester that they really start realizing how different it is, even though we have discussed it multiple times throughout the semester. I present a contract at the beginning of the semester. They have to sign it. They have to understand it. I talk with them about it. We have a mid-semester review where we talk about, hey, this is how many things you've done in each category. This is where your grade is as a result. And even still, I don't think a lot of them really fully understand what has happened until toward the end of the semester. However, I will say a lot of students that say that they started out apprehensive about it end up liking it at the end of the semester. Most of the evaluations I get at the end of the semester are like, oh, I didn't really understand what was going on, but honestly, it took the pressure off me and I was able to do this project I really liked. I was able to explore what I really wanted to. There will sometimes be a few people that are like, I wish I'd gotten grades, because they want to see their progress. This is the most compelling argument I've gotten from students. They would like to see their grade go from maybe getting a 75 at the beginning of the semester on an assignment to getting an 80, to getting this, to see their progress throughout the semester. So that's something I'm personally working on with my assessment scheme, as a way to show students how they're making progress. Because I think sometimes my complete incomplete doesn't really share with them, hey, I'm I'm making progress throughout the semester. And I think there are ways that you can do that.
I think one way I've done that is just it having a rubric for the major assignments, and my criteria are the course outcomes, and then there's like four levels, and so I have had students come up and be like, I gotta meet expectations and rhetorical awareness, but I wanted a, a superior or whatever. Have you ever tried just using a rubric in that way?
No, but I like the idea of kind of combining that. Like maybe like it doesn't affect their grade necessarily. It just
No, it doesn't
gives them
affect their grade.
information.
There
I
is no
like
grade.
that. Yeah, I like that because that's what I try to do with my comments and my feedback. But I think I need something a little more akin to what you're talking about, a grade or like an assessment, that's specific, because some students just want to be ranked, even though I personally think that's a poor product of the academic system, that this need to constantly rank and be better or worse than other people. I think that's a problem, but it is how most of my students are raised to kind of understand what they're
For me,
doing. So
it's one of those hills that I'm willing to die on. Like that's why I use our LMS is I really would prefer not to use it because I don't feel that they align with my philosophy on learning and growth and experimentation and failing, make failing and learning from the failures. So I would prefer not to use it, but I use it because it's a hill I'm willing to die on. Like I want them to have something. I've taken away grades. They should still at least have their
yeah,
have their LMS as like a safety blanket, and even the rubric is another kind of blanket that I give them, so it's not so overwhelming and different.
yeah,
So
yeah.
some
I like
students.
that idea.
Thanks. Some students are really prepared for our classes, and some are really underprepared. So, um, how did can you talk about the difference between those two groups of students in the way that they seem to like or not like, or be stressed out by or not be stressed out by your grading contract? Like, let's start with the
Mhm.
students who are underprepared for college writing and communication. How does it work
Yeah,
for those students?
yeah, that's a real issue. I conducted a study on grading contracts at Texas Tech starting last spring in our first year writing program. And I definitely use different kinds of contracts and different kinds of things for different classes. And first year writing is a particular class. It's the one like freshman level class I teach where you get people brand new to college that are really not prepared a lot of the time. The upper level courses, you'll still get, students that are not totally prepared, but first year writing, you get the biggest, I think, disparity between people that are really prepared and people that are not. And the people that are not very prepared, honestly, I think respond a little bit better. If I'm really honest, it appeals to them because the pressure of having to get a great grade. I mean, sometimes they'll experience apprehension at the beginning of the semester, but I think once we start going through this semester and they compare it to their other classes and, where they're realizing, oh, this is college now and things are way harder. In my class, they're like, oh, I still have a shot to be okay. Like I can be okay in this class, like getting my work done, and it's teaching them to be productive in a way that helps them in their other classes as well. Like, oh, as long as I turn something in, like I'm making progress, I'm getting feedback, I'm giving feedback to others without the pressure of like, I needed a 95 on this, um, to keep my scholarship or whatever. So they have a much clearer view of where their grade is throughout the semester, which I think helps those people that are a little less prepared. Also, the people that are a little less prepared tend to be maybe a little less attached to making a super high grade. So it doesn't make them as sad when they're like, oh, I do all this work and that gets me, a B or whatever. And then I have to do other work to get to an A. Like it's less of a drag for them because they're maybe a little less attached to getting that 100 on everything that they got in high school.
And what about for the ones who are like, I've always gotten A's in English? How is it for them?
Yes, for our study, for sure, those students were not happy with a grading contract that's centered around making a B. So if you use a Sawanoy's contract, it kind of centers around making a B and then doing additional elective kinds of work to get to an A. And they felt like if they're doing all this extra work, they should get an A. they're like they felt like the base level should be an A.
Yeah.
However, their comments contradicted this in that they were like, okay, I think we should do all this work and that base level work should be an A. But they're like, but I think other people who are doing all this work in this class aren't doing as good of work as me. And so they shouldn't get an A for doing all of these things. So they're saying things that contradict themselves, like, oh, just doing all this work should be an A, but clearly some people are just skating by. So it shouldn't be an A. So there's students aren't really, it shows that there's like sort of a mental battle going on with them. I think with those higher achieving students, I mean, one change I'm making in the next semester to that particular contract is to do more of the categorical type of thing that I do in I've done in previous like upper level classes where it's more like how many things have you done in each category, so it doesn't feel like the A is additional work above the B. It just feels like you're you do additional work for any grade. Anyway, it's you can get into the nitty gritty of all of that, but I think the main thing is those sort of more prepared students sometimes come from an experience of like they really want to know that they're the best in the class and they want
Hmm.
something that tells them that. And you know, philosophically, I'm kind of like, I don't need to tell you that. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that's kind of one of the mindsets we're trying to push back against with the whole non-traditional grading anyways. So it's natural. I mean, it makes sense that they would not like that all the time. Uh, Um, uh, it's all in the way you frame it. Isn't that crazy? Because it's not that big of a shift for you to just say it's not extra work, it's just in these categories. That's just could take 10 minutes to revise your rubric, but it ripples through the whole class because now they see it differently. So that's why you always have to be willing to change and adapt when you're using something beyond besides traditional grading. I imagine you've probably um, changed a lot in the years you've been doing this and gotten really creative. Um, could you speak to that, like your willingness to change throughout and be creative and adapt?
I think that, yeah, the willingness to adapt extends all the way from a single class to over time. Number one, I have to be willing to actually negotiate with students if they want to negotiate the contract. Most of my students don't really want to, but having that openness and having that willingness throughout the semester to say, this aspect of the contract isn't working, and being willing to change that is really important. As I've gone through different iterations of different contracts, I've certainly changed in that I've used different kinds of contracts for different types of classes. Because my first year writing classes are different from, say, a third year, information design class, where I'm like, hey, we need to practice doing, Adobe, products, and it's just a different environment. Um, but I definitely have changed my contracts to be less complicated. I think I started out with a pretty complicated contract. I've tried to make them less and less complicated. I've used contracts that have, bonuses and penalties in them. I've, done ones where it's just like, you do this amount of work, here you go. Um, I definitely talk to my students a lot about it, and that sort of changed my mindset around what a contract needs to be. Um, just kind of the different things that count, how much different things count for. I mean, I think you start seeing, at least for me, as I go through the different classes, what students spend time on, what they spend effort on, and what needs to take up space in the contract and what doesn't. I think, maybe peer reviews, I thought they needed to be a certain way in the beginning and they had to turn in, this much work for a peer review. And now my idea of what a peer review is and how that's collaboratively done is a little bit looser. Just things like that change over time.
So, I mean, Asao Inoue's contract was a big deal for a lot of us. It really made a lot of waves in our field, and it's what got me into non-traditional grading. But it's not the only way to do non-traditional grading. Could you speak to that? I mean, specifically about Dr. Inoue's contract and why it doesn't just have to be that way.
Yes, it's a great contract to start out on. I know it's what I started out with was the Illinois contract. I think it provides a really good blueprint, and I think pushing toward a more labor-based contract is great. Previous contracts had really focused on, hey, you can get contract up to a B, and then it's just the instructor's discretion to get to an A. Like that was kind of the most popular one. And I know it's what I think Inouye had used previously at Fresno State. I think that's what they had had. And he was like, why just up to a B? Why can't the whole thing just be what you turn in? Why are we still using instructor discretion when the whole reason we have the contract is because instructor discretion is sometimes way off, just way off.
And
And
and biased.
yes, and biased in
But
ways that we can't really account for.
right, it's sadly but sad but true. and it's just I think it's human for it to be biased. And that's why another thing I like about Dr. Inouye is that he's bringing up white language supremacy, and something I wanted to interject when you were talking about how some students uh, like or don't like the contract is my students who come from homes where non-mainstream white English is spoken love the contract and
Yes.
thrive under
Same.
it. Absolutely thrive under it. So
And you see them getting so inventive with the way they'll write and open up. Like, you know, I always get the comment, I thought that I was a bad writer. I've been told I was a bad writer. I've been told, and like, I can do well under this system.
yeah, but we owe a lot of debt to Dr. Inouye. But uh, what are your so you've moved away from it? Would you say you've kind of gotten less rigid? You think it's kind of
It's I'm
rigid?
definitely less rigid. My contract is less rigid. Like I said, it's less complicated, less rigid, you know, these little point distinctions, you know, how much is this assignment worth and how many, you know, how many things are you know, I still require, you know, a certain amount of absences or a certain amount of completes and incompletes. Like I have threshold amounts that are allowed and that require penalties and things like that. But I don't have a bunch of different categories for things. I I guess I was introduced after I did a noise contract for a while. I was introduced to another contract, and I don't even know where it came from. It was just Dr. Phillips had used it. She'd gotten it from somebody else.
Dr.
A mentor.
Lisa, yeah, Lisa
Hmm?
Phillip, Dr.
Yeah,
Lisa Phillips at Texas Tech.
yes, Dr. Lisa Phillips.
She was a
Yeah.
mentor of yours. Okay.
Yes, she had used a contract from someone else, and it was much more, it was still centered around a B, but it was a little bit more like bonus and penalty based, like, and that was all it was. Like there weren't any of these extra things, and it the course was designed a little bit more like a smorgasbord of potential activities that you could do and you could take on different numbers of. And so it was just kind of a different, a freer model that I thought it was a little bit freer model. Um, so I started taking some from that. And I know with my students now, I mean, I'll incorporate different things every semester. I don't know. I think Sal's thing is a great, sorry, my dogs are about to go crazy. But I think that the Inouye contract is a really good one to go off of at the beginning. But as you go through, you're going to find things that you want to change and do differently. So,
So at Colorado State, where I teach, I'm really grateful that we're having conversations about academic labor, um, and because you know, it's this is teaching composition or writing or communication is a labor-intensive job. Could you speak to? I'll just ask you straight out: is this more work doing this kind of grading than traditional grading? Is it less work? Can you speak to the amount of work you have to put in to make this work?
yes, I can. It's definitely more work up front, but I would say that after you put in that initial hard work up front, it's less work and much less angst as the semester goes on. um, you definitely have to prep the contract, understand it. And like you said, it's all in the framing. So when you present this to the class, you need to understand what you're doing, be prepared to answer questions. And those initial conversations with students really shape what the contract is throughout the semester. But that initial work I put in at the beginning of the semester makes the rest of the semester so much easier because I'm not spending so much time in my mind thinking, well, is this a 78 or an 82? Or is this, you know, I'm able to just look at their stuff, comment on it, move on. Like, look at stuff, comment on it. Is it complete? Yes, no, whatever. Here you know, do this other stuff, don't do this other stuff. You know, another way my contract differs a lot from Inouye's is in revision. I emphasize revision a lot. And you know, revisions are required, revisions are expected. It's not just like, oh, that means students can choose whether they want to do them or not. But you know, that's another thing. But as the semester goes on, I know some instructors that have limited the number of revisions that can also reduce the amount of work that you have to do. For me, it's really easy to do revisions because I usually have very specific things that were addressed by the contract, addressed by the assignment descriptions that I'm looking for when I'm grading. Up front, I've done the hard work of deciding this is what I'm looking for in this assignment. And so when I look at the assignment, I'm not just, is this good? Is this bad? Like I have specific things I'm looking for. And it makes it go so much faster, and it makes it faster for the students, I think, too. Um, so yeah, upfront a lot of work, but as it goes through, to me, the lack of mental anguish is worth it.
Totally worth it. I agree too. The work becomes more satisfying and dare I say enjoyable.
Yes. I'm having a conversation with my students, and it's not about the grades. They have to read my comments to understand what's going on. And yeah, there's so much more to talk about. It's just better.
Okay, so Dr. Cowan, I would like to give you the opportunity to have the last word. Is there anything else you would like to? Uh, Michelle just defended her dissertation, so she's Dr. Cowan. Uh, is there anything
Um,
is there anything
I
else
would
you'd like?
say,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, I mean, I definitely just would emphasize the willingness to evaluate your contract throughout the semester and reflect on what you're doing. Um, Take chances to talk. If more than one instructor is doing grading contracts, those conversations can be so productive because you will get great ideas from other instructors who are like, oh, I decided to, offer extra points for doing these other process related things, or I decided to do this. And like, you'll learn from other people that are sort of bending the contract in little ways that you're like, oh, this makes more sense going forward to do it this way. I just think having ongoing conversations with other instructors and with your students, like always check in with your students throughout the semester. And I think the grading contract offers something for you to talk about with your students. And I think it's such a great tool in that way. It's not just assessing what we're doing. It's another tool for students to really reflect on what is good writing, why is this considered good writing, how do I communicate with my instructor in a professional way about this? I mean, they're learning communication principles by using the contract with you. The contract is a tool to help train all kinds of communication. And I just think those ongoing conversations are what makes it really great for me. Whereas traditional grading would just kind of exist in the background and not be anything. This is actually a very present part of the class, and it makes it much more engaging to me.
Well said. Thank you so much, Michelle, and I hope you have a great summer and good luck at um, your new institution in Virginia.
Yes. Washington and Lee. Thanks.
Washington and Lee. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. Got it. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.